Thank you very much. Not only a 4.440, but I told him to introduce me as 6'3", 240. Why is everybody laughing every time I do that joke? It is a pleasure to be here today, and I want to say thank you really to all of the great speakers who have come and spent time today and talking about great ideas about TED, whether it was a theme about breast cancer that touched our lives. My wife is a breast cancer survivor, to issues in Haiti, to people that talk about making tough decisions to spend more time with your children. As a person who had the great ability to coach all of my kids in various sports, we're brothers and sisters here today. So first and foremost, I can't go into a restaurant when the host comes up to me and she says, "Are you ready?" without my mind instantly saying, "For some football." That's the world. But it's rare, actually, that we ever have an opportunity to say, "Are you ready for an ethical discourse on the morality of sport?" I can tell by the stunned silence that not all of you have been engaged in such a great, fantastic, thought-provoking, exciting thing as an ethical discussion about the morality of sport. But our big idea in our union is just that where we live, even though professional football is a $10 billion a year enterprise, even though each and every year we break viewership records, each and every year the Super Bowl gets bigger and bigger, the reality of where our union lives and the one in which we act is the one that concerns ourselves with the ethical and morale of football. Why? Because we don't see the sport of football in any way distinguished from the people, the men, the women, the children who play this sport on every level. So when people have a discussion or there is a conversation about whether, quote unquote, football is safe, in our union, our big idea is football doesn't exist in and of itself. It is inextricably tied to those who want to play it, those who want to watch it, those who want to be a part of it. So our big idea is one simple idea, that the only way to ensure the safety and health of those who play the game is to have a singular focus on the ethics, the morality, the honesty, and the accountability in sports. And let me just start. This is not an indictment of football. This is not an apologia of football either. What it is this hope that we can embrace the singular idea that if we engage in the right thought about the people who play the game, the people who watch the game, the people who are a part of the enterprise of football, we can make better decisions about safety. We can make better decisions about college athletes. We can make better decisions about youth individuals who are playing football. We can make even better decisions about how you and I, as people who love the game, will watch and enjoy the sport. There is perhaps no greater frame about what it means to singularly focus on the morality of football than to just sit back and think about a couple of numbers. A $10 billion industry that also resulted in nearly 4,500 injuries last year. There are only 1,800 players who play. 4,500 injuries mean one simple thing. By the NFL's own statistics and their own admission, the injury rate in the National Football League is 100%. 100. The career this year for an active roster amongst our teams in the National Football League, the average career is now 3.1 years. So for us and for our union, that frame of the certainty of injuries, the shortness of that career means simply one thing, that while everyone thinks about the economics of football, and certainly my good friend Roger Goodell and I had a wonderful time fighting our way through the lockout and negotiating this deal. Okay. I was just, it was just wondering how long of a pause we would have to make before I said that. But the ethics and morality of football is something that we focus on each and every day. Perhaps there is no greater historical frame for this than to think about this for a second. 1 year in a 4-month span, 26 young men died playing the game of football. The following year, 14 young men died playing the game of football. For the consecutive 3 or 4 years, that number ranged between 19 and 11 young men dying playing the game of football. And no, we're not talking about the recent settlement of the lawsuit. We're not talking about even the changes in football over the last 5 years. What I am talking about was the years 1904 to 1909, when college players were literally dying on the football field. We sometimes forget that the tragedy that framed that instance was something so severe, something that gripped the nation so much, that President Theodore Roosevelt intervened in the debate about whether football, as they knew it at that time, would exist. The first person to get laid out in 1909 that year happened to be Teddy Roosevelt Jr. as a Harvard freshman. There is a plaque at my alma mater in the University of Virginia that is a plaque to a young man who died on the football field in 1909. But football did not die. Rather, 3 groups of people engaged in a wrestling match, not about whether football is good, not about even whether football is safe. The 3 people, or the 3 groups of people who were involved in this great wrestling match, were the reformers who wanted to change football. The people who believed that somehow there was something good about this sport, that if they could only change it to protect and improve the safety, then it'd be worth keeping. On another side, there were those, primarily academics, who believed that by having groups of young men playing college football and risking crippling diseases, that this was something that our universities should not be a part of. And then there were the hardliners who just simply loved football for the way it was. But over the span of nearly those 5 or 6 years that led to the creation of the first intercollegiate athlete group, the precursor to the national NCAA, what happened is that football did stick around. Rules were changed. But to me, the real issue or the real importance of that period of time is not so much what rules changed. It wasn't really so much that they got rid of the flying wedge. It really wasn't even so much that over those 5 or 6 years, the fluctuation of deaths went up and down. No, to me, the real interesting issue is that they embraced the same idea that I think we all have to embrace. Why do we believe it is necessary to do something about it? And I think the answer to that is something that has run through every speaker today. Because what we care about is the intense beauty, the humanity of what we all choose to be a part of. The fact that whether it is the St. Louis Rams who are suiting up, or whether it's the Pee Wee football doing it down the street, whether it's the college up the road, or whether it's a group of women who still play professional football, whether it is any one of those groups, the things that make us care, the things that make those folks who want to engage in the wonderful and the beauty of art, those who want to engage in trying to find cures for the diseases that ail them, is what? Our intense belief that the people who are involved in this are our brothers and our sisters, our sons and our daughters. And today it seems that we have to have that same thought, the rebirth of that thought, that the only thing that will be a sufficient guide for us reaching the right decisions about sport and our athletes is to embrace the fact that we must engage in an honest discussion about the ethics, morality, and accountability in sports. Why is that so important? Last year, after his quarterback was knocked out in a game, an offensive lineman, one of our team representatives, tore into the fans who he heard booing the fact that his quarterback had left the field because of a concussion. And the next day, the writer in this particular article started off with a headline that simply read this: NFL players are gladiators, like it or not. Gladiators. It sounds fantastic. It sounds intensely what? Manly and tough. But the reality is that there is nothing more dishonest than to refer to any one of our athletes, any one of your sons or daughters, any one of the people who each and every day choose to play this sport as a gladiator. Why? Because while there are parallels that people love to draw between our stadiums and the Colosseums in Rome, the fundamental nature of what happened in Rome in those Colosseums, the brutality of the entertainment that was allowed to go on, was predicated on what? A belief that the people who were in the middle of the stadiums were less than the people who were watching the carnage. So no, we cannot be in a world where we, even for a moment, would believe that we can be dishonest about the people who are partakers of the sport, people who like to watch the sport, the administrators who put on the sport, or our sons and daughters who play it. For no moment can we actually engage in the thought or indulge in the thought process that by some way, shape, or form, they are what? Less than we are. The ugliest and the most disappointing parts of our national culture, our history, are those moments when we allowed actions and inactions to be predicated upon a belief that somehow a group of people were somehow less. It should not ever find a place in everyday life. It certainly cannot find a place in professional football. So how do we turn it around? First, by recognizing and embracing that while we have made a number of great changes in the safety of football and the promotion of the individual athlete on the youth, college, and professional level, we have work to do. Last year alone, evidence of the dishonesty were prevalent in the National Football League. Last year alone, 7 to 8 football players were returned to games even though they had concussions, even though we know that the teams didn't follow their own concussion protocol. We know today that college athletes, and while there is a great discussion about whether they should be paid or not, the reality of college athletes' life in big schools is that many of those young men and women are working between 40 and 70 hours a week for their sport at a place where they're supposed to be getting what? An education. And that at times, many of those young people leave those universities having sustained injuries where they have no insurance, where they're not being taken care of, where they're not being protected. Who in this room would want that for their sons and for their daughters? For us and for our union, our big idea is simple. The beauty of sport is inextricably tied to how you see the people who play, how the people who play interact with each other, and the moral and ethical responsibilities that flow from that. And that is why I love the players of the National Football League. That's why I love the opportunity to be a coach myself. That's why I love the fans who love our game. But the beauty of this game and the beauty of sport will always be tied to one big idea, namely, how you see each and every one of the people who've chosen to be a part of a great game, chosen to be a part of sport.